After years of soaring prices, fueled by nostalgia and strong demand, the classic car market is finally seeing a slowdown. Economic factors, generational changes, and shifting taste might be some of the key factors in this market trend. Why is it happening? Is this really a crash or just a long overdue adjustment? Are classic cars still a safe investment? And which models defy trends and still climb? Stay with us to find out more. The muscle car market has been going down for a while. Over the last 2 years, we saw a 10% drop, which gives us good introspective into this specific part of the classic car market. But even though the classic car market is definitely cooling down, muscle cars are a diverse segment, with such a high volume sales and so many models that have been oscillating in popularity over the years, as the demand largely depends on price hikes, relevance in popular culture, etc. But in general, things are pretty clear. The muscle car market isn't as it used to be a couple of years ago. After the COVID-19 pandemic and the peak that followed, the muscle car market is now facing negative outside factors, such as inflationary pressure and the overall political, social, and economic climate, which doesn't seem particularly promising. These days, many things seem like a luxury, so classic cars are not exactly seen as a necessity, although we can't say that the market still isn't strong. The thing is that the classic muscle car market is oversaturated. Simply, the offer exceeds demand significantly, but that's not the only problem. These cars have been skyrocketing in value. The thing is that some super rare models with specific engines, features, and configurations are often sold for millions of dollars, but that also created the chain effect in the way that all muscle cars have been increasing their value. Many sellers get the perception that they are selling something special, even though they actually own nothing more than a typical muscle car. Overestimation has become the key word, and now the market is in such a state that it can no longer sustain those inflated prices. It's time for a correction. As mentioned, classic muscle cars have been taking a hit lately, and what's particularly intriguing is that the most popular models are suffering the most. These cars, although with huge fan bases, are showing a negative trend. We are talking about models like the 1969 to 1970 Mustangs, which have dropped in value by $15,000 on average. Other iconic models are suffering as well, including the Pontiac GTO, a model that's usually considered the ultimate muscle car. That model has lost 22.5% of its value over the last 2 years. Iconic Chevys are facing the same problems, though still not as extreme. A classic Camaro from the late 1960s is down $3,000, while one and only Chevelle has been down $5,500. All these models have passionate followers, and for them, this trend seems quite concerning. All these icons have been hiking rapidly over the last 5 years and are still way more expensive than they were back in 2020, but still, they have dropped 10% in value over the last year. Market changes are always a complex thing, and it's not easy to point out actual reasons. But with classic muscle cars, there's one thing that comes to mind immediately: demographics. Through all these decades, baby boomers have been carrying the muscle car market, but these folks are now in their 70s and 80s. So it's time to pass the love for muscle cars to younger generations. With millennials, things are also relatively simple. They are showing a lot of interest in classic cars, particularly modified classics. But still, those closer to Gen X tend to show a little bit different approach to muscle car enthusiasm. Being unique is more important than ever, but let's not neglect the fact that classic muscle is more expensive than ever. So there are also practical reasons for changes in trends. We are talking about how younger generations are not necessarily attracted by models that have been the most desired and therefore most expensive so far. They are focusing more on lower volume production cars, those that weren't as successful as GM and Ford models back in the day. Mopar cars are the best example, as their value remains stable in this volatile market. Moreover, some of the models have recorded a massive increase in value. For example, the Charger has seen a massive $60,000 increase over the last few years, while the Coronet's and Challenger's average auction price has risen by $15,000 over the last few years. In other words, the most common muscle cars like Mustangs and Camaros have seen their peak and are now in decline. It's time for rarer birds to dominate. This leads us to another problem that younger generations of car enthusiasts have. Prices continue to rise, and for most folks, classic muscle cars are out of reach. So most of them are looking for alternatives, for super cool cars from the 1980s and 1990s that have been almost forgotten but now gain more traction than ever. Monte Carlo, Buick Grand Nationals, and similar cars have suddenly become hot stuff. Still not as expensive as classic muscle cars, but on their way there. Other car enthusiasts go in the opposite direction and still choose cars from the 1960s and 1970s, though those less common, big body cars like Pontiac Catalina, Buick LeSabre, Chevy Impala, Oldsmobile Delta, etc. These cars are still relatively affordable, but have great potential to become highly sought after collector's items in the near future. While muscle cars have been oscillating lately in terms of pricing and demand, the segment that's rapidly growing is classic pickup trucks. This is a super hot segment right now, and you can just take Chevy's old C10 as an example. Not so long ago, these trucks were abandoned in barns or work sites. It was relatively easy to find a good example for less than $10,000. But now, things are getting out of control, considering that a good example now goes for $30,000 or $40,000 pretty easily. Moreover, high-end, fully restored, or customized examples are often sold for six-figure prices at the most prestigious auctions. The 1967 to 1972 C10s are particularly in demand, and the market is currently full of restored models. Conversion from long into short beds is particularly popular, along with custom finishes. Still, we can't say that this is the only generation in high demand. Square body trucks are popular as well, just like the OBS trucks from the 1990s. Other trucks from the same eras are gaining traction too, particularly models from Dodge and Ford. Altogether, it's easy to conclude that classic trucks are an excellent investment these days. It seems like they are even getting more attention on the street than classic muscle cars. But whether you're into trucks or classic muscle cars, as long as you remain at a safe distance from the most popular, mainstream models, this is a great time to buy. Beside unique ownership experience, these relatively affordable cars are a great investment, as they can only get more recognition in the future. Our advice would be to follow market data, try to spot the trends, and find a good opportunity. In that way, the chances that you could blow with the classic car investments are minimal. It's a win-win situation, where you're not just making a low-risk investment, but also get the opportunity to drive, enjoy, and experience the unbeatable feeling of owning and cruising in a classic car. Of course, muscle cars are the most popular segment of the classic car market, but not the only one. And while it's been decades since it became clear that exotic cars will never be affordable, the latest trends show that certain models that used to be considered not particularly iconic are getting more traction than ever, and that could potentially be a great investment. For example, there's the old Datsun 280ZX from 1978 that's particularly popular in its turbocharged version, and now goes for about $32,000 on average, which is a massive 138% increase compared to 2019. Certain icons are getting close to their peak, like the old Jaguar E-Type from the early 1960s. The interest has increased, and that's driving up the price, with models equipped with the famous 3.8-liter engine going all the way up to $200,000 on auctions. If you're into young-timers, one of the most interesting investments at the moment could be the Lamborghini Gallardo, but only the one with 6-speed transmission. It has gained 7% in its value, and while that may not sound like much at first, it is, because we are talking about a car that already costs a fortune. Another relatively young car that's gaining attention and showing potential to become a modern classic is the Dodge Magnum SRT-8. Produced between 2005 and 2008, it's pretty much the ultimate American wagon, a muscle car of the modern era with the Hemi V8 that puts out 425 horsepower. Perfect for enthusiasts who look for a modern take on American muscle car philosophy. It gained 39% in its value over the last 5 years, and we have no doubts the same trend will continue. So make sure to get one while they're still relatively affordable. Finally, let's not forget a cheap car like the Honda Prelude, particularly the version produced in the late 1990s, which is getting more traction than ever. This attractive coupe has all it takes to become a Japanese classic. It looks good, it handles well, and above anything else, it's incredibly reliable. So it's just a matter of time before it becomes ridiculously expensive, just like the Integra did a while ago. What do you think of the current situation in the classic car market? Will all those super expensive classics finally become more accessible? Do you have a model you think will gain value and become a sought-after classic in the near future? Write in the comments. We highly appreciate your contribution. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.